Cositus' mandibles clicked faintly, a flicker of mild annoyance mixing with a touch of embarrassment. He recognized the tease for what it was, a subtle jab at his rigid demeanor. His response, when it came, was laced with a sliver of sarcasm. And here I thought my stoic demeanor screamed untrustworthy to everyone. Cositus froze, again not from danger, not from battle readiness, but because Ainzuilgaon had teased him. His mandibles parted slightly, once, twice. The icy air around him seemed to still, as if even the glacier itself paused in awe at this unprecedented moment. I am honored, he stammered, his voice ever so slightly beneath its usual depth. He clutched the scroll like a shield as if it could protect him from the warmth spreading through his chest. Then, with rigid formality and barely contained reverence, and I shall never betray that trust, not even in death, a small puff of frost escaped his lips, not from anger or cold, but pure emotional overload. He didn't notice it yet, but for the first time since creation, Cositus was smiling. Cositus, still trying to regain his composure, kept his gaze fixed at a point in the distance, refusing to let his lord see well, he wasn't even sure he knew what he was feeling. His thoughts, normally organized, disciplined, were a chaotic whirlwind. He hadn't felt this off balance since never. There had never been a since. Nazarick was stability, duty, purpose. And he was a tool. It felt warmer. Cositus remained still, unaware of the full extent of his own display, unaware that his rigid pride had softened at the edges, that his antennae were no longer tense but subtly relaxed, like frost melting under dawn light. Ain said nothing. And yet, something in that silence felt different, warmer. Cositus finally looked up, not with blind devotion this time but with quiet realization. "My lord," he murmured, voice low and rough with emotion. "Even if I do not understand everything, I am glad to stand here. To speak. To serve." He bowed deeply, a true bow, slow and deliberate, his towering form folding before Ain's not just out of duty, but out of something deeper. Somewhere beyond bone and chitin, a sword learned how to feel. Cositus straightened, his rigid formality returning in the midst of his emotional whirlwind. His grip on the scroll tightened a fraction, the only trace of his internal storm. He nodded once, more stiffly now, protecting the softness he'd just discovered and the vulnerability that came with it. "Yes, my lord," he replied, voice once more controlled, a warrior's mask in place. But the warmth, the lingered, hidden beneath exoskeleton. Cocytus watched in silence as Ainz walked away, the echoes of his footsteps fading gradually into the frosty silence. With Ainz gone, the weight of everything that had just happened finally settled heavily in the air. Cocytus remained still, the scroll clutched against his chest like a lifeline. For a long while the only sounds were the distant creaking of ice, and Cocytus's quiet, ragged breaths. Deep, measured, as if he was trying to steady his heart, or the emotions churning within him. Cocytus watched Ainz walk away, his calmed eyes following the familiar regal silhouette. There was a pause, subtle in its intensity. Then quietly, Cocytus called after him. The words slipped out, as though drawn by some hidden thread from the heart of all he was. "May I ask you a question before you go?" His voice was firm, but beneath the warrior's veneer, a whisper of hope. Cocytus hesitated. Then, with all the quiet courage of a warrior facing an unknown battlefield, "When you return to Nazarick," a pause. The frost beneath his feet shimmered faintly as if responding to his pulse. "Would it be acceptable if I were simply there? Not as a guardian on duty, not wielding weapons, just present?" His voice dropped lower. "Like how you stood with Touch Me." Cocytus hesitated just for a breath. The icy air stilled around him. Then, voice low and earnest, "The next time you walk through my floor," a pause. "Deliberate, walk with you. Even if only for a moment, not as guardian to master, but Cocytus to Ainz." If it were possible for Cocytus to blush under chitin, his cheeks would be burning bright. The warmth of Ainz's words settled in his chest like a new kind of fire, a warmth he'd never known. He watched Ainz walk away, his form disappearing into the frozen halls. And then, the smallest of motions, a slight lift of his chin. For the first time in centuries, Cocytus stood proudly, not as a sword, but as a person. The scroll in his hands wasn't just a duty anymore, it was a promise. Cocytus stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the weight of Ainz's words. "Pleases me." The phrase echoed in his skull, reverberating through every fiber of his being. Not command, not duty. Pleasure. His mandibles trembled. His forearms clenched, then slowly relaxed as if releasing a lifetime of tension. When Ainz finally vanished beyond the glacial passage, Cocytus did not move for a long time. Then, softly, he raised a hand to his chest plate where no heart beat, yet something warm now pulsed beneath. And in the silence of the fifth floor, amidst snow and ice that had witnessed only war, Cocytus whispered to no one, "I will be there, next time," and began to train, not for battle, but for presence. Cocytus watched him go, his compound eyes fixed on Ainz's back. The cold air seemed to thicken, his breath visible in the sudden chill. He said nothing, only holding that simple answer in his armored heart, feeling something he had not felt in years. Warmth. Belonging. Purpose beyond the endless fight. I see, he finally murmured, more to himself than to the retreating figure. A pause. And then, my lord. Alone once more, Cositus remained motionless in the glacial silence. The scroll from Nigredo was tucked carefully against his chest, beneath armored plating, close to where a heart might have been. He did not train, he did not spar. Instead, for the first time since his creation, Cositus simply stood still, and let the quiet of Nazarick settle around him like snow on stone. A single thought burned in his mind, warm against the ice. I am allowed to be here, and so he would be. The silence returned, deep, eternal, yet no longer empty. Cositus stood motionless in the frozen expanse, the scroll still clasped to his chest like a relic. The wind whispered through the glacier, but he did not feel its bite. His thoughts were no longer of drills or duty, but of presence, of a moment, of a touch, of words that warmed more than any fire ever could. Slowly, deliberately, he retracted his weapons and knelt into a silent stance, not in submission, but in reflection. A warrior meditating not on war, but on belonging. And for the first time since creation, Cositus did not train with blades at all that night. He simply waited, in case his lord passed by again. Cositus's thoughts reluctantly broke at the sound of approaching footsteps. He looked up quickly, his compound eyes narrowing as a white-clad figure emerged from the frozen fog. His stance immediately fell into a defensive one, the muscles in his forearms tensing, ready to reach for weapons. Then he stopped himself. The girl was a subject of Nazarick, small, unthreatening, carrying a mere wand. Cositus' head snapped up, his antennae perking forward instantly, battle-trained senses on high alert. His eyes darted around, seeking the source of movement in the distance. Then he saw her, a figure clad in white against the icy expanse, carrying a wand. He watched her approach. His words were not an accusation, merely a question. Cositus hummed again at her answer, his gaze still studying her. Despite her trepidation, she stood her ground, staff held tightly in her hands. He took another deliberate step forward. His armored frame loomed over her slender, white-cloaked form. The distance, no more than a few feet, felt suddenly. Cositus paused at the sight. She was genuinely afraid. He could see it now. Her hands on the staff, knuckles white, her shoulders drawn in, the way she held her breath. His instincts told him threats and harsh words would only increase her fear. His mind, now thawed with purpose, offered another option. Look at me. No command. A request. He tilted his head at that, genuine curiosity filling his gaze. He'd been called many things, terrifying, imposing, monstrous, but never stunning, especially not to a caster. He took a final step forward, towering above her small frame. The distance was almost non-existent now. Cositus paused. The word struck him, not with pride but with a strange sense of discomfort. He had heard such praise before, from subordinates, from warriors trained under him. But now, after Ainz's visit, it sounded different, not like honor, like distance. His mandibles clicked softly as he lowered himself slightly, just enough to meet her eye level, his towering height less overwhelming. He repeated quietly, "Then, you see strength in me, it wasn't a boast." It was realization. He glanced down at his clawed hands, the same hands that had just trembled under Ainz's gentle touch not long ago. But even the strongest glacier, he said slowly, is shaped by wind and time. He straightened slightly, voice softening further, and even I have moments stillness where I feel small. The girl blinked, her fear faltering beneath sheer surprise. Cositus, small? But something in his tone told her he wasn't lying. After a beat, Do not be stunned by my form, he rumbled. Be stunned by your own courage to stand here at all. Then, he did something no subordinate had ever seen before on the 5th floor. Cocytus reached out, with one massive hand, and gently tapped the tip of her staff with 2 fingers. A faint ring echoed through the ice, like steel meeting snowflake and finding harmony. Train well, he said simply. Your presence too has weight. Deserve, the word surprised him. His fingers still on her staff, he leaned slightly back, studying her with an intensity that made goosebumps crawl beneath her cloak. The icy air crackled around them, charged with sudden tension. Strength is not about deserving words, he countered, voice deepening. His eyes bore into hers, mandibles clicking softly, the sound oddly soothing like a warrior's lullaby. It's about growth. He withdrew his hand, slowly, deliberately. The moment... That hesitation did not escape him. He observed her, the nervous shift, the uncertain flicker of her eyes beneath those lenses. A warrior of battle would have seen weakness in that moment, an enemy, an opportunity. But he saw something else. Something he suddenly... You wish to leave, he stated bluntly. But you do not want to seem rude. Cocytus watched her and noted the movement. Part of him wanted to let her go. Let her continue her training, let her spread the word of his presence. Let her fear him, as guardian of the 5th floor should be feared. But another part, the part that lingered from his conversation with Ainz, the part that still tingled with the ghost of a touch. He made a choice. Stay. One word. Quiet. Commanding. Cocytus let out a soft hum, his eyes narrowing with unexpected warmth. He had expected obedience. He had not expected such quick surrender. He glanced down at her, fragile, unarmored. In the cold, white landscape she looked small. A snowflake in a blizzard. You have a name? Finrin, he repeated. Pleasing. Light, a snowflake dancing on a frozen air. He tilted his head slightly, studying her from every angle. And how old are you, Finrin? Finrin. He repeated the name slowly, each syllable feeling oddly foreign, yet strangely pleasant in his mouth. He was used to commands, to status, to titles. Finrin. A simple, unassuming name. An unusual choice for a magic caster, he observed, not unkindly. His mandibles clicked once, the sound strangely. Cositus could see the wheels of her mind spinning, and almost felt amused. Yet his words were merely a casual observation, not a criticism. He tilted his head slightly, noting her trembling lips. Most mages I have met prefer impressive names, he explained, a hint of dry humor in his voice. Finrin sounds. Cositus fell silent at that, his compound eyes narrowing not in judgment but in something deeper. Recognition. Simple magic, he echoed, voice dropping to a low hum. Yet it still burns through ice, still strikes the enemy, still protects your comrades. He took a single step forward, the ground barely trembling beneath his weight, and raised one clawed hand, pointing not at her, but at the frozen expanse around them. This glacier was shaped by one drop of water, repeating endlessly. Then he turned back to her, his gaze firm yet no longer cold. Do not confuse simplicity with weakness, Finrin. Cositus hummed slightly at her response. Consforeign word for him. Was this why Ainz's touch had left such a burning warmth in his chest? This strange need he shook the thought away, mandibles clicking again. Focus, warrior. How old are you? He asked suddenly, tone casual, almost nonchalant, as if he was talking about the weather. Cositus fell silent, his mandibles parting slightly. The answer was technically correct, yet it missed the heart of what he sought. He looked at Finrin, not as a subordinate, but as something, a fellow creation, small, fragile, yet standing on the same ice that had birthed him. No, he said gently, shaking his head, a slow, deliberate motion, not when you were made. He leaned in slightly, the cold aura around him softening, not lessening, but changing, like frost yielding to breath. I mean, how old do you feel? And for the first time in all of Nazarick, a guardian asked not about duty, but about a soul. Cositus hummed quietly, noting the gesture. Awkward, yes, but genuine, a rare quality amongst Nazaric's denizens. He tilted his head in silent permission for her question, the movement almost friendly. Cositus paused as if considering her question. He'd asked her to stay, but not out of utility, not out of rank, but because in the silence of the glacier he'd wanted a presence. A simple, fragile presence that had the courage to stand where others feared to tread, because her courage warmed him. And yet he could not say all of that, not yet. So he chose another simpler truth. I wanted your company, he said. For a time. Cositus was silent for a long moment, long enough that the wind seemed to pause, as if listening. Then, softly he lowered his head just a fraction. Not in threat, not in command, but sunk closer to sharing. I did not ask you to stay for duty, he rumbled, voice quieter now, almost reverent. I asked you to stay because Ainzulgaun just taught me the value of presence. His forearms shifted slightly, not reaching for weapons. Never that, just opening, and I wished, another pause, rare, vulnerable, to see if it felt the same with someone like you, not as master and subordinate, but as two souls on ice, simply breathing together. Then, a single flicker of humor, he added gruffly, your fear amuses me. Cositus's mandibles twitched an echo of a smile as Finrin laughed. He had not expected laughter, but the sound, it was surprisingly pleasant. He shifted slightly, closing the distance between them just a fraction. You laugh, he noted, voice deep and low, nearly a whisper now, but you still shake underneath your cloak. His mandibles clicked in amusement as he watched her fidget. She was nervous, but she still stood her ground. It was almost endearing. His smile broadened just a fraction, his head tipping slightly to the side, as if considering his next words. Lucky, he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like a foreign spice. Then he took a single step closer, closing the... Cocytus tilted his head again, his compound eyes studying Finrin. He noted the tremors in her voice, the fear and nervousness still present yet fading slightly. She did not cower. She did not run. Cocytus hummed, a sound not of frustration but of understanding. Being near you feels similar to being near Ain's Ual gown, he explained, a hint of wonder in his deep voice. The warmth in my chest, the sense of the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain this? How could he convey that strange, foreign sense of, well, comfort? You do not fear my form, he murmured. That is what I mean. Cocytus shook his head, slowly. His compound eyes dimmed slightly, mandibles clicking in quiet contradiction. Respect is not the same. He lowered one of his massive hands, the one without weapons, and gently tapped his chest plate. Where no heart beat, yet something had stirred all the same. They respect my strength, my duty, my blade. Then he pointed at her, with a single clawed fingertip trembling ever so slightly. But you, Finrin, you did not run when I asked you to stay. You stayed even though your voice shook. Even though your hands tremble around that tiny staff. A pause. Cold air curled between them like a held breath. That is not respect. That is courage without glory. And for the first time in recorded history, Cocytus bowed, not fully, but enough for a mage rank D. The sudden outburst almost made Cocytus smirk. There are no witnesses here. His voice softened, a gentle hum beneath the stern tone. We are truly alone, little Finrin. You and I and the ice we both stand on. He straightened, looking down at her with a rare hint of amusement. Not mockery, but something much like it. A warrior teasing a child, and I have a question for my small trembling courage. Cocytus raised his head, looking down at her again, his massive frame towering over her slender body. He watched as she shook, half hidden by her hood, the staff trembling in her hands, and chuckled. No one else in all of Nazarick has the courage to stand before me at my full height, he rumbled, voice a strange blend of pride and amusement. What makes you think they have courage enough to witness me in the act of kindness? He leaned in slightly, the towering figure almost looming over her, his voice dropping to a dangerous murmur. Why are you still shaking? Cocytus hummed softly as she gave the obvious answer. His head tilted as he watched her shiver, more than the cold. Her whole body was tense. A warrior's instincts could never miss it. We were somewhere warm. He lowered his hand, gently resting the tip of a single claw under her chin. Not in threat. Carefully. Gently. Cocytus let out a slow sigh, almost a chuckle. His claw lifted her chin ever so slightly, a silent demand for her. He wanted to meet her gaze, even as it avoided his. He echoed softly, a hint of dry humor in his voice. Have you never felt truly warm, small one? Not from fire or armor or spell. The air around them grew colder, just from another touch. Cocytus hummed at her reply, his claw lightly tracing the underside of her jaw. For once so fragile she didn't even try to pull away. He could feel the racing pulse in the hollow of her neck. No parent, no partner, even Cocytus stilled, not a twitch of his claw, not a breath from his mandibles. Only the wind dared to move between them, never. His voice dropped lower, not with anger but something rarer, understanding. He let his claw fall gently from her chin. Then slowly, deliberately, he stepped back, giving space. Giving warmth by absence of pressure. Then, he rumbled after a long silence, this warrior shall remember that too. For now, no more demands. No more tests, just the quiet of the glacier. And two souls, neither born nor made for touch, but beginning to wonder what it might feel like. Cocytus turned slightly toward the frozen horizon. Come, he said softly, I will walk with you, until your steps grow steady. A guardian offering escort, not because she needed protection, but because he finally understood what it meant to stand beside someone. Cocytus took one slow, deliberate step forward, the ice cracking faintly beneath his weight. Then another, and another. Not fast, not as he usually moved, precise, warrior-like. No, this time. He matched her pace. Behind him trailed the small figure in white, a tiny echo against the endless glacier. Every now and then she stumbled on frost-laden stone. Every time, without looking back, Cocytus slowed just enough for her to catch up. Wind howled across the frozen plain, but not a word passed between them. None needed to be spoken. For once, the guardian of the fifth floor wasn't training an army, he was walking with a friend. And somewhere deep within that armored chiton, something quietly glowed.